Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, host of the Praxi Pod, and today we have Mr. Stephen Harris. How are you, Stephen?
Good. And you know I pronounced my name Stephen Harris.
Oh no, he's going to correct me. I'm sorry, I apologise. You are the Mr. All right, so I'm going to say Mr. Harris then. Mr. Harris, keep it.
You don't have to call me Mr. Harris. Just call me Stephen. Everybody calls me Stephen. It's fine. Good to see you, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good, yeah, very good. Thank you for joining us on today's show and today's episode. And yeah, I mean, I think we spoke recently about you coming on the show, and I know that we're going to cover, your background and stuff like that, and what you've been doing and what you're doing now. But obviously, I know you've been in the data space for quite a long time, so we all got the kind of the war stories and the wounds and the kind of flying close to the sun. But for anybody
Yes.
who doesn't know you right now, but obviously we'll know you after the episode, could you just maybe do a quick intro, and then we'll get into the meat and two veg, as they say, of the episode.
Awesome. I'll just do a quick little intro. As you mentioned, right? 30 years or so in this space. And it's been quite the interesting journey. I mean, I've been on board with some really, really, I think, well-known brands, right? Of recent, I just started doing some advisory work in the federal space for a DoD contractor. But prior to that, I was with Microsoft. Prior to that, VMware. Prior to that, Facebook. Prior to that, Wells Fargo. And then I spent 20 some years in management consulting, right? So I've seen a ton of different customers across many different industries. And, you pick up a lot during your years of consulting, but you really pick up a lot when you embed yourself in the commercial space, in industry around data, right? Because many organizations are just, grappling with, not only how to manage that data, but where does the data bring value for us? And I think they've started to really discover that. Now it's a matter of how do we really activate that for value?
Interesting. I mean, that's what I love about your background is you've obviously been helping people to understand what they could do with data. When you're kind of external, but then there's nothing like being operational and being in the line role, which you've been multiple times in multiple different industries. So I presume you've got a fascinating kind of perspective, different lenses on that, because it's like when the book doesn't, there's nobody to kind of delegate to. The book stops with you. It gives
That's
you
right.
like a laser focus on stuff, I suppose. Is that what you would say as well? Or
That's a really good way to sort of articulate that. It's interesting. As a management consultant, at the end of the day, you've got a statement of work that you need to deliver against, right? And so you're there for a very definitive purpose and reason, and you deliver against that. Irrespective of sort of what you identify and find on the edges, right, for the customer or their respective environments. When I was at VMware reporting to the CFO at the time, Zane Rowe, not only did I have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization, right, I was part of that core team ensuring that the numbers lined up at the end of every quarter. And so prior to reporting to the street, the buck did stop with me, right? Extending beyond that, touching areas of engineering to help them better understand how product is performing, what that really means in context for the customer. How do we actually wrap our minds around and provide, increased or better services in value to our partner ecosystem to help drive our product to market. And that story was also true at Microsoft. And while organizations today are all screaming, AI, we have AI. There's no better test of AI, or maybe I'll say it more bluntly. Don't test your AI on your customer, right? Test it internally, right? Understand the power of what you have or what you don't have, because at the end of the day, it all starts with your data. And the real question organizations should be asking is, and the real questions boards should be asking is our data ready for AI? Are we AI ready from a data perspective? Because you may have all the capability and all the smarts from an engineering perspective and an AI perspective, but if you haven't actually tested that AI on your own foundational data, you don't really understand the value that you can deliver, the risks that you're taking on, nor do you understand the journey ahead and what investment priorities should be taking place. And so, my word of advice, always starting out the gate, is test it on your internal customer before you test it on your external customer. Don't make them the guinea pig.
Yeah, it's fascinating how that phenomenon of the thing where who owns the data,
Right?
and actually it's like, oh, it's them, yeah, or
Yep.
it's not me, it's like and this whole AI phenomenon that's happened or been amplified, I suppose, across the world in the last 18 months. It really seems to have create kind of a wake up call for getting these foundational things fixed. Is that your kind of view as well? Is that what it's really kind of as like a
It is
burning platform kind of thing?
Yeah, it is a burning platform for many organizations. And I do think that, those organizations that have had a little bit of external pressure from regulators, like the banking industry, right? So any heavy regulated industry is going to have a bit more structure around their investments and how they manage their ecosystem of data, because they have to, right? There's so many components of regulatory compliance for financial services institutions that they have not had a choice, right? BCBS 239 was really sort of that grounding space for all of the GSIFI, globally significant banks. And that was a big wake up call, for financial services. The tech space. So when you think about big tech, right, largely, whether they, whether they are a Microsoft or whether they were a Facebook, which is kind of like, a fast growing big tech, right? Now Meta, they have had a very different journey. Microsoft certainly had its time shining in the light of the federal regulators, right, where they had to sort of fix some things. Meta's gone through that same challenge, and I think what you're now seeing is, because of those investments in foundational data, the acceleration around their AI becomes a motion that they can actually attach to and leverage. But that doesn't mean that all things are fixed and work well, right? Because there, those areas where they have had to invest were very acute, defined areas, not like federal regulation for financial services, where you basically have to be able to uh, lay out and understand and prove the journey of that data from its source to its target, all the way down to every financial instrument and every interaction that occurs with a particular customer across your organization and across all products and services that you provide. That's a very different kind of data ecosystem and set of challenges to solve for than, oh, we're just really looking to understand how we meet our GDPR regulatory compliance, right? Which is focused around interactions and customer data or contact data with respect to marketing and or sales. So um, uh, every organization is going to have its unique set of data management challenges to address. And I think they are quickly coming to realize that the accumulation of all of their investments around technology, how data then surfaces itself with that respective technology becomes, the new focal point in terms of how you drive AI forward at scale and for what benefit, purpose, and community it should serve.
I was just going to say to you, I presume you were talking about like kind of GDPR, CCPA kind of
Yep.
compliance issues around that. If you could say the front end of the business, like the right to forget and all those kind of GDPR
Yep.
kind of life cycle things to do with customers. But yeah, I suppose it's. I wasn't obviously. I'm not part of probably all the details that you are aware of about the whole thing. But obviously, I'm not aware in the big tech space. There's been a lot of very interesting moves going on there, and there's been a lot of, what do you call it, in a polite way, wrist slapping. Yeah, about how do you handle data? What's the appropriate way of handling data? Yeah,
Yeah.
in a compliant way.
Yeah, the data handling component of it can be extremely challenging, especially because you have data regulation that is germane to location, right? And so the provenance of the data becomes a big question mark. Ownership of the data, not only internally, But we've even seen major companies come out and say, "We don't own your data; you own your data," right? And so it's like, that's kind of an interesting message. But I think the point is, not only do you have a right and a responsibility to protecting that data, so all the privacy or the privacy that sits around in individuals' personal information that you are accountable for managing and keeping secure, but also how you engage, right, with that particular individual across the various aspects of your organization and ensuring that the integrity of how that customer wants to be interacted with and touched in terms of how your organization faces off with them must be adhered to. It's really interesting. I think the European Union has figured out not only how to unpack and uncover where those laws are not being adhered to, but there's a very strong mandate around it. Now, what you will see, I think, coming from the U.S. here very shortly are some pretty strict regulations around AI policy, right? And so that regulation is now surfacing. So for organizations who have properly thought through not only their infrastructure, the life cycle of data, how that data gets managed, governed, protected, sourced, etc. But then how that data then surfaces itself inside of its AI capability will also become a new layer of regulation that will sit on top. My hope and expectation is that the US government doesn't overreach in this area from a regulatory perspective, because at the end of the day, businesses need to have the flexibility to grow, right? Which serves us all very well in the end, both as consumers, but also as just healthy economies. And so overly regulated domains, I don't think do us justice. I think it's going to be a learning journey for all of us, right? Because AI, for many, I mean, not myself, because I've been in this space for so many years, but AI for many is an unknown. And the interesting thing about AI and how machine learning works is that, many times most consumers don't really understand if it's AI or if it's the machine learning, right? That's providing the capability. And I think getting really clear definition around what is AI and versus everything else is really, really important. And then I think also understanding, the various use cases. So we're going to have to educate not only our organizations and institutions and our economies, we're going to have to educate our regulators on this process as well, because that will, I think, help increase the awareness of where we need to regulate versus not. But I also think it'll help the educated consumer understand what it is that they are subject to, right? And to know the difference of when they're actually getting trusted advice from an AI engine. And when I say, consumer, that could be enterprise, right? It could be anywhere the technology is operating in an AI capacity to provide a particular set of actions or insights to drive whatever motion or value. That needs to be well understood and well tested, but also what I mean, but also well governed, right? And so, how does an organization understand and know and protect or prevent the AI from going off the rails?
I think that's the part. I mean, that's a really good explanation. Thanks for that. I mean, I think it's interesting though, because the labeling it AI is a very easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as we both know, there's a lot of depth behind that, and there's a lot
That's
of
right.
different levels. And the problem is that I don't know. When you talk at an exec level now, do you feel like there's still a gap on education of the exec level, understanding what are those levels, and then how does data fit into those levels of AI, whether it's machine learning or et cetera, or is is that getting better, or is it still something that's high on the agenda? You think, oh, it needs to be done better at?
I think it's still early days, right? I think depending on which sector you're in, and you know, if you sit in, big tech, obviously, I think that understanding is quite clear. But I wouldn't assume, right? Because not in all cases is it extremely clear on, where's AI separated at the edge from the machine learning. And where does machine learning produce an output that becomes consumed by the AI that then provides its own set of outputs. And so I do think there are opportunities, certainly in every industry, for the executive suite or the C-suite of organizations to continue to build that knowledge. But I also think that it's incumbent upon enterprises and consumers, or all audiences, to educate themselves, right? And so I don't think that we can necessarily just hold institutions accountable for, oh, you didn't tell me, right? It's like, well, you kind of know you need to have a driver's license to drive, right? And so if you're going to drive this technology, if you're going to leverage this technology, then you should understand and make it a point to understand how it's working and performing to provide you a service. Now, at the end of the day, I do think it is incumbent upon organizations to take a very pharmaceutical approach in, this, when consuming this particular drug, right? Pharmacists say, here are all the side effects that may occur, right? And so organizations that haven't spent time testing their technology don't understand what the side effects of their technology are, and therefore they can't tell you that. And so one of the questions that any educated consumer of any AI provider product should be asking it: what are the side effects that my organization should be aware of as we take on this particular technology to provide X portfolio of capabilities or services to our enterprise? And I think if they think about it in that construct, that will help both educate the C-suite, it'll educate the technology teams, but it becomes not a red flag, but it becomes a question of how do we then internalize this so that we can self-regulate, right, from an organization standpoint around that technology, so that we provide those layers of protection and barriers, but that we also improve the product as it takes on more and more adoption within the enterprise or by its audiences.
Yeah, one of the things I think you touched on a bit earlier was about this whole thing about validation. So, what any thought? Because there's this thing where you obviously got there's different types of data, right? There's structured,
Right.
semi-structured, unstructured data. And
Right.
obviously, with this whole phenomenon of large language models and who's got the biggest large language model in the world, blah 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 blah. The thing would be, I suppose, the piece around how do you validate it? How do you validate that particular? You say you're going to internally test it. You're going
Yeah.
to
So I think
internally
there's a,
test something.
yeah, I
How
think
are you
there's a
going to internally test it?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things with respect to using external versus internal data sets and models, right? Large language models, great, right? They provide, a benefit and a service. But at the end of the day, it's all about context in context of our business, right? And so while the large language model may provide value, the question is does that value equate, increase, or diminish as I join it up with internal data to make it relevant for our business? And so the only way you can know that is by, validating that through use cases. And so as you build those use cases and context inside of your construct of your business, that's where you'll come to know where there are, high degrees of maturity around leveraging the model, or not. You'll also unpack and discover where there's opportunity to drive improvement, and you may learn through that journey that there is less value in the LLM for business context, but maybe for other relevant topics. that aren't as high profile risk for your business. And so you can open or unlock those windows. I think it's really important for organizations to understand and to know who and where and for what purposes are third party or large language industry models being leveraged, and how they're being leveraged, and in what context are they being leveraged. And then I also think it's important, to determine how you establish scalable capability that allows you to predict and protect. And what I mean by that is predict when an output or an outcome is not in alignment with what you would recommend, or what a human would recommend, in terms of output or actions. There have been many cases today where the AI has gone severely off the rails, right? I don't know if you saw the recent case with McDonald's.
Oh,
And
you mean
so,
you mean like the hallucination concept or something different?
yes, hallucinations, right? And so when the
Okay.
model hallucinates, or when there's not context in context, right? And I think the AI was at the edge working in the drive-through, and I think the customer ordered, let's say they ordered an 8-piece chicken nugget, right? But somehow that turned into 128 pieces of chicken nuggets. And I don't know if I have the story exactly.
They're obviously very hungry that day, though.
Yeah, yeah. But the one example that I wanted to point out in particular was when the AI told the customer, you can't order that. And so there's nothing more frustrating for a customer when they are being told that they can't order something that they normally order all the time.
Oh, was that
And
in, is that was that in McDonald's drive-through as well? Then? Is that what
I
happened?
believe that was with a McDonald's drive-through. Yeah.
I mean, you do get some things that are out of stock. I presume they can make it on the kind of the they can make the Big Mac. They can make the Big Mac. I suppose it's saying there's a supply chain issue or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why did it do that? Do you know why it did that?
I'm assuming it did that because the context of what the customer was ordering was out of bounds. And so the AI didn't understand what the customer was actually ordering. And therefore, it told the customer that you can't do that. It's sort of like when Siri first hit or Alexa first hit the, market, right? You would ask Alexa or Siri a question, and, sometimes the response would be, I don't understand, or I can't help you with that, right? And maybe that was a more appropriate answer, right? So Amazon was well ahead of the curve in terms of um, being a bit smart in terms of the intelligence inside when asking certain
Yeah, I suppose
questions.
it's the thing about like the happy path and the unhappy path, and it's like
Exactly.
how you manage the non-happy path. Yeah,
That's right.
or
Exactly.
yeah, the exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you don't want to create these customer experiences that create, degradation in your CSAT scores, right? At the end of the day. And so that all hinges back on my, initial comment around test this stuff with your internal customers, right? Get really good at understanding how the technology serves your internal stakeholders, understand the data and the foundation of that data, the lineage of it, the quality of that data, measure it continuously so that you constantly are feeding the model and training the model in a way that allows it to grow in the right direction, to improve its capabilities, as opposed to create scenarios where you're now having to, respond or answer the mail for customers where they've had a bad experience. And so
But I suppose
eliminate
I mean, I suppose that's kind of like that's a discipline around introducing capability into a business, isn't it? Is how
that in the
rigorous you are around that. If you're doing anything, you know, in any industry. I mean, I've been in telco, I've been in financial services, I've been in retail, and if you don't validate it, then you're gonna and you don't do the comprehensive breadth and depth. Then you're opening yourself up for those exceptional or edge use cases or edge conditions, which may come and bite you in an unpleasant place.
That's right. And you can't solve for every edge case, right? I'm not suggesting that because perfect is the enemy of good at the end of the day, right? And so you want to take a product to market that has been well tested, just as you would do with any product that you take to market. Treat the data as a product, which has always been my message, right? Data is a product. If you treat it as a product, you can build it as a product, and you can land it and market it, sell and service it as a product. And that becomes the foundation for your AI set of capabilities, right? And so if you've instituted that as a practice inside of your organization, you will take full benefit from that. If you haven't, you're on a learning journey. And not only are you learning the AI space at the same time that you're trying to fix your foundation, test your data, and the quality of that data through and through, and then manage that data ecosystem so that it serves your AI endpoints. You're doing both at the same time. So it's going to feel real painful, both from a capital, from an investment standpoint for organizations that haven't actually done the pre-work, but it is an absolute requirement. And one other thing I will just say, any organization that's taking on AI as its core foundation for providing capability, not only do you need to have a strategy and a roadmap that attaches to your business strategy, right? So those things need to be actually in concert and dance well together. At the end of the day, you want to know how these investments are being prioritized and where, but you need to have an architecture and a set of principles that the AI capabilities snap to and align to. Because if you don't have that in place, you're going to have this proliferation of expense that sits around AI all across your organization that is disconnected in every way. And that's going to be more problematic to fix down the road than it will be to slow down, put the strategy in place, understand.
Is that what you would call AI debt? That technical debt. You're introducing AI debt.
Yeah. If you don't do these things, your AI debt translation, aka tech debt, has just increased. And the best part, or the worst part about it all, is that it may even be harder to discover and unpack. Right. And so this is why you want to have some centralized capability that can help orchestrate that dance across your enterprise.
I mean, it's interesting because the situation you mentioned with McDonald's, I wasn't aware of that example. So thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's difficult to keep up with the kind of the news feed that's going on at the moment.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's interesting because if you look at that very high profile brand, then the question for me would be then, how do people dig into that? And then what people can learn from that? Because does that then create the kind of fear, uncertainty and doubt at the exec level of these organizations where they go, we want to jump into this AI swimming pool and, swim along with it and ride the wave and everything like that. But actually it's kind of like, is it a bit of a second take on it? Because I'm seeing that there's some organizations will grab the nettle and, so to speak, and get on with it. But is that going to cause some kind of like fear and trepidation or fear, uncertainty and doubt? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's more of a think about it in this context. You remember the concept of crossing the chasm, right? And so you have the early adopters who cross the chasm, right? Those early adopters who cross the chasm are always the ones who pay the price, right? They pay the price of the pain of being first. I had a boss that said to me one time, "We don't want to be first." And I said, "Why not?" Right? He says, "Well, remember the concept?" And I said, "I got it." Right? He says, "But being a very close second is not a bad thing." And so,
like a fast follower.
Yeah, fast follower, right? Be a fast follower. I mean, listen, there always will be players that are leaders in industry, and they are going to be first. Learn from them, right? Learn what the points of pain are. Figure out how to navigate those areas very judiciously, and be really diligent about how you take something to market. And so testing and testing and testing in your various markets and how the capability surfaces is really, really important. For example, when you are dealing with, you know, when you're dealing with a global capability that you're rolling out in many different languages, you want to make sure that the context is right, right? And so I think that's also going to be a discipline lens that you have to layer into the whole product development process, right? As you consume that data for those particular use cases. I think at the end of the day, the message is if you're going to be fast and you're going to be first, be prepared for the pain that comes along with that. But don't let that discourage you because there are benefits, right, to allowing, to being the first to market, right? You develop a muscle and a strength, and you continue to invest in that space so that you can grow. And so I just think that others should be really, really aware of what's happening, not to be discouraged, but to take that to note, to learn from that and incorporate those learnings as part of their journey.
It's really interesting. I mean, one of the things I just wanted to switch the conversation up, because I know that I think you've been a chief data officer and you've been a chief data and analytics officer. Is that right? In different
I've been a chief data officer. I've been a chief data and analytics officer. I've been a chief AI officer, if you will. A
Oh, right, okay.
global head of data science and growth analytics. So I've pretty much done it all, right? I've built product, data product. I've surfaced product in existing product. And so, I have patents in this area. And I've seen the many different derivations of, large organizations trying to drive transformation around this whole ecosystem of data. It is not something that can be done overnight, right? It takes commitment, it takes investment, and it takes the will of the organization to be on board with what is actually required. And oftentimes, like you mentioned before, there's always this big question mark of who owns the data. You know what? We're not going to get into a data war here because data does make people a little bit crazy. And ownership of that data also can be a challenge. And this is where having a strong enterprise data governance program in place, where you've got definitive roles and responsibilities around the data domains that exist for your organization, the accountable parties who are responsible for that data, and a way to be able to give them a report card on the performance of how that data is both being managed and used, and where those scores land throughout the life cycle of growth of those domains. And so end all the wars inside of an organization with respect to who owns the data, and spend that time investing in ensuring that you've got the proper data management foundation and program policies, procedures, and standards in place that will keep both you and your customers safe.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that, because I think the reason I asked you as well was because I just saw something literally last week. I was at Big Data London, which is like the largest. It's like 20,000 people in London. That's like one of the largest ones in Europe. And there was a debate that was coming out after that event, literally just very recently, where they were saying that is the role of the CDO, the Chief Data Officer, is that actually, and it was like this debate on LinkedIn about it. Is it a line role, yeah, or is it actually a transformation role where you then embed it into the CIO, the CTO, and then is it a transitional role? It's a transformation role, where you get data back on the agenda and then you embed it and then you move on to the next role? Or do you see it as a line role forever in an organization? What was it? Have you got any thoughts about that?
It's interesting. I think that journey of the CDO that I know all too well and have written about it, has, CDO 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. I think we're now at like CDO 4.0. And I will tell you this, it's all going to largely depend on the enterprise and the function in which the CDO has been operating for that enterprise. I think in financial services, they've figured it out, right? They were first to market. Regulatory compliance drove that need. Industry, who has not been heavily regulated, has they've struggled, I think, with the adoption of CDO in some spaces, right? I think there are companies today that still don't have a chief data officer. I know that you know the journey for a CDO largely at inception is transformational. I can tell you that for sure, right? Because you are there to really transform the org, and that is requires a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of will, right? Will from the leader and also will from the enterprise. That must be backed with investment. So if you are going to commit to it, then commit to it. Don't cut it short. Don't stop the progress. And be patient with what is required because it is truly transformational. And anything worth doing and doing right should actually survive the test of time. I think as those capabilities become embedded and adopted by the enterprise, and you have a way to measure that, CMMI, DMM, right, which is the way that an institution can actually determine where they are from a data management perspective based on being assessed and testing those capabilities. Uh, Knowing that will give you a really good lens around both the maturity of your organization and where you stand. I would also caveat and say, don't be fooled by the levels of the CMMI, DMM uh, uh, classifications. So, there's level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Hardly anyone is a level 5. I mean, like the aspiration to be a 5 is probably off the charts, and you were born in the cloud and you did it all right day one.
You have,
Right?
you have to have like a cape on and like a big S on your
Exactly.
shirt.
It's like you have all the money in the world, and that's all you've ever done was invest in data management. I think, aspirationally getting to a 3 is, for a large enterprise, is great, but don't be fooled by the journey, right? Because to go from 1 to 2 is a big deal, and to go from 2 to 3 is a really big deal, right? We helped, I led the charge at Wells Fargo for this, right? Getting to CMMI level 3. And, needless to say, $2 billion later, right? And many years. Yeah, exactly. It's not a small number. Now that encompassed many different things. We were addressing regulatory compliance. We were addressing many uh, uh, aspects of data and the life cycle of it to serve the enterprise and all of its needs. But I just want to reinforce that graduating through those levels not only takes time, but takes significant amount of investment. And so, you should not step into those waters lightly because it's a journey that you really need to be willing to commit to over time.
So it could be a multi-year transformation, and
It
then
will be a multi-year
yeah,
transformation.
it will. Sorry, it will. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then what you're saying is depending on the context and the industry, it then
Yes.
could be transition to a line role, or it
Correct.
transitions into. So if you didn't continue as a line role, who do you think would own it?
Yeah,
Who do you,
here's the thing. I think there always needs to be someone that sits at the enterprise level that is accountable at the enterprise level, and that can both drive governance, policy, prioritization, has a voice at the table, where especially now that this intersection of data and AI are becoming so much more critical, we're going to see this organizational metamorphosis that really unpacks itself, right? Like, okay, so now what does the CTO do versus the CIO versus the CDO versus the chief AI officer versus the chief product officer, right? So you've got all of these roles now intersecting where there might be a little bit of competition happening in the room, right, at the C-suite level. And there really doesn't,
that's exactly why I asked the question, because that's
yeah,
what I'm seeing as well. There's a
and,
bit
and there
of a
really doesn't, yeah, there doesn't need to be competition. But listen, anything that is the newest and the hottest thing is going to create competition in an organization amongst these roles. Why? Because within the data domain, data folks are just as technical as all of your your technical folks and your engineering resources, right? And so you've got data engineering, you've got AI and ML engineers, and you've got software engineering, right? And you've got the product folks. And so the question becomes, how do we actually create a way for these roles to um, dance together in an organization that doesn't create drag, but creates lift so that we can accelerate and move faster, right? In our own rights. And this is why I think it's going to be critical, irrespective of where you are in that journey. In the line functions, you need someone who understands, I'll call it like the BU. They've got that BU knowledge. They understand that particular product and how it works and services its customers. And so they need to remain in that space because they are the experts in that space. Someone that sits at the enterprise, which is differentiated from someone who sits in the BU, should own things like enterprise customer, right? What is the journey of the customer? All the things around our enterprise customer and that data and managing that data ecosystem then come together with your line function or your BU because they have the product knowledge. When you bring those two together, now you've got a new insight that helps you understand how you should market to a particular customer with respect to that product. What are the priorities around feature sets that now should actually surface themselves based on looking at the cohort of similar customers in similar domains, right? And this particular product in its domain. And should we be talking
which is a bit like the group versus BU versus geography kind of dimension that you have in an organization structure. Is that what you're thinking as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that same model applies, right? Because someone who sits at the enterprise level is going to have a much larger, wider lens around both where the enterprise is going in terms of its focus around driving, share of wallet or whatever the top, initiatives are of the enterprise, and they can guide, right, and be a resource so that the folks that are sitting in the group or in the GO or in the BU can attach to that and accelerate. I think also there needs to be enterprise scale capability, right? You don't want all of this capability running in an independent way for your organization. And so
Well, yeah,
providing
because it can get fragmented. You see, can't it? It can get like
yeah, you want
fragmented
to
if you.
avoid that fragmentation by having that enterprise scalable platform. So, for example, providing data science as a service at scale. In other words, what I really mean by that is we provide the infrastructure, we provide the enterprise customer data, we provide all of the capability around, let's say, our partners or our channel. We will support every function across the enterprise, be it finance, be it marketing, be it sales support. And oh, by the way, if you're on the product teams and you're building models and you're running those models, we will allow you to then bring your model to our playground. We will test that. We will verify and validate it. We will host it and manage it for you. And then you can turn around and go off and do the next thing. But we're constantly going to be in a cycle of communication with you because as the data continues to, as the model learns and the data continues to grow around that particular use case that we're supporting, we want to make sure that we don't have atrophy or hallucination that's occurring, right? So there is a level of governance and accountability that maintains, but the focus can now move on because now that enterprise service is being provided to your organization, which allows these teams to stay embedded and focused and continue to iterate on new product feature sets, capabilities, etc.
So it becomes like a shared service then, effectively, like a core,
Exactly.
like a backbone. Yeah,
That's right.
interesting.
That's right.
Yeah, just switching to a slightly, I suppose, topic close to my heart is something we're doing at Praxi, obviously, because the Praxi Pod is about, data, what's going on with AI, what's going on with this Gen AI phenomenon, and what we're passionate about is data curation and data classification. So I want to get your point of view on that topic. Any perspectives on, is it important? Is it something you should do? Is it something you ignore? What any views on data curation classification? How does that fit into the kind of analytics value chain from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the curation and the classification of your data is extremely important. I think having a capability that allows you to manage your metadata associated with all of your data becomes the cat's meow, right? It becomes your golden nugget, if you will, inside of your organization. And the reason you need to have that metadata and all of that instrumentation around your data is not only does it give you confidence in the data, right? Accuracy around it. It also creates guardrails. Hey, do not use this in this scenario, right? And so curated data classification around your data becomes a data foundational responsibility. And those who are not doing that are going to feel the pain of it in many different ways. And it's going to show up on your balance sheet at the end of the day. And I know people don't like to hear that because most of the time they will not actually dissect the root cause of what's actually occurring. But I have so many examples of where we were able to basically look at a symptom that was occurring at the surface with a customer, a partner in our financials, and drive that all the way back down to, guess what? It's because we didn't do the diligence around attributing this particular data set and attaching it to, a contract, right? So we knew exactly when a customer was due a service for support, right? Uh, Prepaid, right? So they'd already paid for the support services. And so, to avoid that choppiness in the customer experience or those kinds of scenarios unearthing themselves and surfacing themselves with the customer, you need to have that curation and that classification of
So
your
just a quick
data.
question: Did you have to do like a fishbone analysis on that? Do you have to do like a cause and effect? Is that how you did that? Or
Well, we did almost like a failure modes and effects analysis, right? And so what are all
failure mode,
the
FMEA? Oh wow!
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Right. And so, and that just comes from my risk background, right? So from my risk management background. And so I think, you know, taking sort of that approach helps you dissect where did this actually go wrong? Why did it go wrong? What were the causes of it? And then how do we validate that we really understand the root cause versus the symptom that surfaced itself as part of an experience for a customer?
what we're seeing is that obviously data is going in one way. It's going like that. It's going. I think was it 175 zettabytes by next year or something.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I mean,
a lot of that is unstructured as well. So, our context is you can't do that manually. It's just impossible, right?
it is
So
impossible to do.
how do you use automation and then intelligent curation and classification to kind of grab your arms around it and manage it better? It's a really interesting if you link that back to the comments you made earlier about the AI, the foundational piece of the AI stuff, then
Right.
it's like a what do you call it? It's like a Colosseum moment, like in Rome. It's like a Colosseum moment. It's like it's like where they're all coming into they all want to watch the Colosseum and what's going on in the Colosseum, but actually you've got to get all the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together
That's
in a,
right.
in a good way.
Here's a really good uh, validation for building AI for the purposes of understanding where you are as an enterprise from a maturity perspective and the quality of your data. If you don't really understand it, then why don't you do both of them at the same time? Except instead of building AI that you're going to take to market, why don't you build AI that you take to market in your enterprise? Have pointed AI at all of your data foundation. Have it tell you where you lack what a complete customer record should look like. Have it tell you, right? Use the AI to your benefit. Use it in a way that helps you understand how big your problem is. What is the size of the investment that I need to go fix this? And where do I have gaps that are going to be major roadblocks or barriers for me in the future? So if you don't have good, complete customer records that have the data classifications and are attributed in the right way, and that you understand the source of that data, right? Because there's many organizations that have gone through acquisitions, right? So you acquire the data of that company and you don't even know the state of that data, right? You're buying this company and what are you buying? You're buying the technology? Yeah, you're buying it all. And so you buy the risk, and part of that risk is understanding that data. For all acquisition.
But what you're talking about there is customer 360, isn't it? I mean, a single view of customer, joined up across all your BUs, all your customer
Eventually, that's what
interactions.
you want. Yeah, eventually that's what you want. But just understanding how you define customer, right? Because there are many enterprises today that, definition of customer is very different, right? Across the enterprise. And so, that could be a problem. But getting to that common understanding and knowing what that customer record should look like and all of its different permutations is key. And if you don't understand that, you're going to put your business at risk. And so fix that foundation, use AI to fix your foundation, scale and grow from there, because you'll get there a lot faster than if you just take the old sort of traditional methods of, trying to build intelligence around your data ecosystem based on what you've been working with, right? So if you only know that lens, you don't know to look outside of that. And so AI can help you be a little bit more intelligent in that way.
Fascinating. I mean, I suppose my final question was going to be about if you think about what progress has been made in the last 12 to 18 months, yeah, which is remarkable, yeah. Seems to be, the cycle time seems to be getting faster. What do you think? I mean, I don't know, we're now in 2024. Any view on the next 24 months? I've got a big sense is this agent,
Here's what I
this
think. Here's what I think.
agent thing that's phenomenon that's kind of
Yeah.
seems to be coming out. But
Here's what I think.
any views on that?
Yeah. Here's what I think. I think that we've heard a lot from many different institutions, enterprises, companies about their AI product and their AI capabilities. What we haven't seen a lot is the performance and the value that's actually uh, representative of any investment or how that product should be performing. I think we're going to be in for a bit of a unbalanced rude awakening. We're going to see some of these capabilities that will take off and surface very, very well and will land and will do as they predicted. I think we're going to see others that are going to have short of catastrophic failure, but will have some challenges ahead. Now,
Like
that
it'll be
is
like a shakeout. You mean it'll be like a
I think
shakeout?
it'll be a shakeout. I think it'll be a shakeout, and I don't think that that is going to be because the technology itself is not good. I think the technology will be great. I think it's all going to come back to what did you feed that technology? Because that technology is giving you exactly what you told it. And if you didn't test and ensure that that data foundation and ecosystem that serve, because the technology is technology, right? Think of AI as an application, right? If you will. And so if that an intelligent application, right? If that intelligent application is consuming unintelligent information or data, it's going to give you an unintelligent output. And so don't blame the technology for failing. Blame the institution for not actually being on top of its data foundation to serve that respective AI technology. That's where I think we're going to see the challenges.
You're hopeful that there's going to be a shakeout, and then don't lose the fact that they're all tools, yeah.
Oh,
And
there are
you've
tools.
got to have ownership. You've got to have
That's right.
ownership of this transition. So that's what I'm taking out of what you just said, which
Yeah,
is
so chief data officers will likely become chief AI officers.
our
Because
chief
they
data.
understand.
No, but if you think about, I've heard, chief data officer, chief AI officer, chief data analytics officer, chief data
And
privacy
AI.
officer. So
Yep.
like, the business cards are getting longer.
I know. You know what? I know. We should just we should figure out a really simple term um, for all of this, new technology. Maybe CIO will come back, right? They'll just be Chief Innovation Officer, and then every function from data and technology will report to the Chief Innovation Officer. So Innovation Officer now has AI, has data, has tech, it has it all. Who
No, but you
knows?
see, the interesting thing, let me just finish off my side, is that back in the, a few decades ago when I was in GE, the chief information officer, yeah, the CIO, what was, information officer? So it was data, information, it was transactions and, transactional business and decision processing and data.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of morphed from there, isn't it? But then maybe it's going full circle. I don't know.
Yeah, it has morphed, and I think it will come full circle. But we shall see. We shall see.
Fantastic. No, really, really, really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been a densely packed sharing. So I appreciate you helping us out today, Stefan.
Well, anything I think that helps. I appreciate being on the show today. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Andrew. You always bring an interesting perspective to the table, and I'm looking forward to doing more.
Exactly. Well, we as we get rolling, you see, we invite you back, and we'll be, like sipping cocktails and everything like that. You see,
those are the best scenarios, because then you get the raw truth from me. No, it's always good. It's always good.
So for people who want to know more about yourself and what you're doing, and follow you, but because obviously you've obviously got a lot of experience in what you shared today. What's the best way of connecting to you, finding you, following you? What would you recommend?
I'm easiest found on LinkedIn. It's the place where I stay most active. And so it's Stefan Harris. It's easy to find me. You can even type in STFFIN. So both spellings show up on LinkedIn. And I can post my LinkedIn as part of this podcast. But yeah, easily track there. All the other social media platforms I don't keep up with as much unless I have someone managing it for me, like I did during my days at VMware. So, so for the most part, all of my business followers are there on LinkedIn.
So we're not going to see you on TikTok anytime soon, then?
You definitely won't see me on TikTok.
And just to be clear, we have no plans to launch Praxi Pod on TikTok anytime soon.
Okay, great, because I don't want the Fed coming after you.
Well, that's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on the show. That's been Stefan Harris, and that was Andrew Cerner, host of the Praxi Pod. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Cheers.